Here, we want to tell a story from the history of art. Let's go to September 1902. In Oslo, Edvard Munch and Tulla Larsen have an appointment together. Munch had refused this invitation for a while and eventually told Tulla, "When I return from my trip, we will talk." Today he has returned from his trip, and they are supposed to have one of those complicated conversations. The kind that, by the end of it, the fate of their relationship becomes clear. Tulla wants their relationship to end in marriage. For some time, she has been insisting to Munch, but Edvard Munch cannot see in himself the ability to trust a woman again. Almost nothing is clear after they meet each other. We know that night Munch and Tulla Larsen saw each other, a woman in love who has become desperate, and a man who feels cornered, and a gun that is fired that night, and 2 bottles of brandy that were almost empty at the moment of the shot. But before seeing what happened that night, we want to go to the roots of what caused this intense fear of women in Edvard Munch. What made a painter who so lovingly depicted the kiss between lovers become known as a vampire? And what made the longest and most continuous scream in history be created by Edvard Munch? If the answer to this question is interesting to you, stay with this episode. Let's take the story back to December 12th, 1863. That is 39 years before the gunshot, when Edvard Munch was born into a deeply religious family in Norway. Edvard's father, Christian Munch, was a doctor, a military doctor, but his own father had been a priest, and so Christian had grown up under radical religious training and raised his children with the same methods. On the other hand, his father's occupation required them to constantly move. They changed homes 8 times only in Oslo, so there was no stability. But let's hear about the mother. The mother suffered from tuberculosis, and when he was no more than 5 years old, his mother died shortly after giving birth to her 5th child. Munch remembers the farewell to his mother. He recalls that all 5 children were beside her, and he was sitting among them on the couch. His mother's dress was black, and her face was pale, and while she was smiling, tears were flowing down her face. Munch writes about his childhood that fear, grief, and death, like black angels, guarded my cradle. And the mother died. The father's method of raising children was very strange. He was an educated man. He was kind, but the God he introduced to his children was more wrathful than merciful. He entertained his children by telling them stories of spirits. At night, he would sit the children together and tell them stories of monsters, stories in which people were punished with divine torment for committing sins. The father was obsessively and pathologically religious, and every failure, every pain, every illness, and even the death of their mother, he considered signs of divine anger. He told the children that their mother was now in the sky, watching them from above, and if they committed sins, their mother would suffer. Munch became familiar very early with this endless suffering that children are exposed to sin. So when at the age of 13 he became seriously ill, from fear of death he promised God that if he survived, he would always avoid worldly pleasures. And his prayer was granted. But shortly after Munch recovered, his older sister became ill. Munch felt deeply guilty. Munch's only refuge in the family was his older sister Sophie. Their sibling relationship was very close. Although their age difference was small, with Sophie's affection, Munch seemed to have preserved a part of their mother inside himself. So when Sophie fell ill, Munch was deeply shaken. Again, it was tuberculosis, the same disease that had taken their mother. And if a faint image of their mother's death had remained in the memory of 5-year-old Munch, now in his adolescence at Sophie's bedside, he experienced scenes he knew he would never forget, images that would scar his soul forever. Munch wrote in his diary that Sophie pleaded, "Dear Edvard, I am in so much pain. Please take this pain away from me." I could not. I went behind the curtain and cried, and Sophie died. And Munch did not know because of whose sins this had happened. In Munch's painting The Sick Child, Sophie is depicted. The first version of this series belongs to 1885. After that, he created 6 more versions because Munch always felt he had still not managed to properly convey the depth of that experience. In this series, Sophie is on her deathbed. A woman, probably Aunt Karen, dressed in dark clothing, holds Sophie's hand to comfort her. But it seems she cannot bear to look into Sophie's eyes. The technique of applying color shows influences of Impressionism. The brush touches are not blended, yet the image does not have full clarity. A critic once said, "It is as if the viewer is looking at this scene through tear-filled eyes." The rhythm of the brush conveys anxiety and worry. Sophie is living the last minutes of her life and is looking at a black curtain, a symbol of death behind which perhaps one could finally see light. But Sophie's death was not the last trauma of Munch's youth. His younger sister Laura, at a young age, developed a nervous disorder. Munch understood that this was probably inherited from their father and knew he himself was also at risk when Laura's condition worsened and she was placed in a mental institution. Munch's fear of madness grew stronger. In fact, Munch's whole life was tied to fear. Fear of death, fear of madness, fear of God, fear of women whose untimely and painful departures had wounded him. And among all these fears, the only refuge Munch had was painting. Munch had started painting only because his illness had forced him to stay home for long periods with Aunt Karen. This woman had come into the family after the mother's death and had lovingly taken care of the children. She was the first person to teach Munch basic drawing. Painting gave Munch peace. It was safe. At least in painting, everything was in his control. He decided whether people stayed or left, laughed or cried, what colors to use, what the story would be. So in 1880, shortly after his 18th birthday, he wrote in his diary, "My decision now is to become a painter." Although he was studying engineering and was actually very good at it, he ultimately left the technical college to become a painter despite his father's objections. His father considered art a profane trade, but Munch had made his decision. In 1881, he enrolled in the Royal School of Art and Design in Oslo, and at age 23, he received a scholarship and went to Paris. Paris from the late 19th century to the mid-20th century is the capital of visual art in the world. The events of the modern era and the birth of all major artistic movements were happening in Paris. But let's see what Paris was like in Munch's time and what influence it had on him. When Munch arrived in Paris, Impressionists had been working for more than a decade. To summarize, Impressionists were a group of artists who believed that colors are dependent on variations of light. And since light changes quickly, Impressionist works were composed of quick, unblended brushstrokes. Their main subjects were landscapes. Impressionism, as the first style of the modern era, had made a lot of noise, but by the time Munch arrived in Paris, their major period was already passing. New styles were slowly emerging from within Impressionism, sometimes even as critiques of it, such as symbolism. Symbolists were a group of artists who had a problem with the realism of Impressionism. They said these Impressionist artists only show reality, whereas an artist should also bring symbols, imagination, dreams, and the world of folklore into their work. And then the post-Impressionists, artists like Van Gogh and Gauguin, who, though born out of Impressionism, created works filled with stronger emotions and artistic passion. All these parallel movements were influencing the young Munch. Let's summarize. The legacy of the Impressionists, the Post-Impressionists like Van Gogh and Gauguin, and the Symbolists, all were parallel movements influencing Munch simultaneously. Now, if the question is, which style does Munch ultimately belong to? I have to explain a bit. In most sources, Munch is introduced as an expressionist. But the issue is that a defined style called Expressionism in visual arts emerged at least 10 or even 15 years after Munch as a structured and organized movement, meaning that Munch was expressionist at a time when Expressionism did not yet exist. How do we solve this problem? Let's talk about what Expressionism is. When we say the works of a certain artist are expressionist, what does it mean? Expressionism emphasizes the expression of the inner emotions and mental states of the artist. When an artist exaggerates forms or colors to express emotion, they are essentially creating an expressionist work. And this did not begin with Munch. Thousands of years earlier, for various reasons, we see such exaggerations in ancient civilizations. After that, it happened again and again. Perhaps we can say that every time an artist exaggerated in portraying the suffering of Christ, the work gained expressionist qualities. And we arrive at Munch, who indeed exaggerated deeply in expressing his emotions. So he had his own personal style. But this personal style, along with the work of other artists like Van Gogh, about 10 or 15 years later, contributed to the formation of a cohesive movement known as Expressionism, whose major artists were active mostly in Germany. Expressionism is a distinct style in Europe between the two world wars, centered mainly in Germany. So, in answer to the question of what Munch's style was, we must say that Munch created expressionist works and ultimately became a pioneer or an influence on artists in the Expressionism style. Generally, the pace of change in the modern era is fast, and restricting an artist to a single style is a difficult task. For example, Picasso, who is famously known as a Cubist artist, also has expressionist works. From the age of 22 onwards, Munch constantly traveled between the cities of Oslo, then called Christiania, Paris, and Berlin, spending each period living in one place. During this time, he became familiar with avant-garde art movements and entered artistic circles, intellectual circles that favored the bohemian lifestyle. What is this bohemian life? Bohemian circles, which emerged in the late 19th century, especially in Paris and Berlin, were hubs for artists who lived and worked outside the conventional structures of society. Intellectuals in these circles sought unlimited freedom and extreme experiences. At the same time, they opposed bourgeois values such as family, religion, money, social order, and similar things. They advocated for free love, rejected marriage, and demanded the government not interfere in sexual matters like marriage and birth control. Munch constantly sat and socialized with people in cafes within these circles, drinking to the health of equality between men and women in free love, and getting drunk. The day after empty glasses, one could witness the excessive consumption of alcohol and a woman who, after a full night of drinking, lay on the bed like a dead person. And this was Munch's daily situation. One could see Munch's inner tension and spiritual conflict in confronting these free-spirited gatherings. Let us not forget that Munch came from a strong, even obsessive, religious background. And for this reason, he was constantly in conflict with himself. He constantly felt guilty. As a child, in his adolescent world, he had asked God for health in exchange for abstaining from worldly pleasures. And now he was drunk every night. The feeling of guilt tormented him. Ordinary people at least feel satisfied when they enjoy themselves, but Munch, in the moments he indulged the most, was precisely the moments he suffered the most. And he could find no wall shorter than women to blame. Why not, since every woman in his life had caused him pain? His mother and sister were taken by illness, and lovers left him with guilt. According to Munch's experience, women are beings whose love is harmful. Munch was often attracted to married women, and the problem began when they returned to their husbands, leaving Munch alone with his thoughts, which were influenced by his religious upbringing. Edvard Munch's painting Madonna is a point of light and darkness. This woman is not a sacred virgin repeatedly depicted in visual arts before. She is extremely free and seductive. Look closely. She seems to be experiencing sexual pleasure, and women were just that for Munch. something between angel and devil, kind-hearted instigators of temptation, who caused Munch, who, given his family background, did not have complete mental health, to fear them. So, when Tulla Larsen entered Munch's life, he was in fact forced to confront all these conflicting emotions within himself. Perhaps this is why their relationship ended in disaster. Tulla Larsen was the daughter of a wealthy wine merchant. She was 29 years old when she was introduced to 35-year-old Munch, a handsome and adventurous painter of those days. Soon, Tulla committed one of the mistakes of her life. She fell in love with Munch. She was the 11th child in a large family, and her father was so wealthy that with the huge inheritance left after his death, all 12 of his children could live a comfortable and luxurious life. Tulla studied graphics in Berlin and, like the educated and wealthy women of that era, was attracted to bohemian circles. The relationship between Tulla Larsen and Edvard Munch progressed. Analysts who have read Munch's letters believe that Edvard Munch did not try to hide his pessimism and disgust for a close, long-term relationship from Tulla. He never pretended to be a caring and kind lover. He made no promises and did not give Tulla false hope. Sometimes he even treated Tulla rudely, just to push her away. However, Tulla did not give up. Munch felt existentially threatened. At one point, he wrote, "You can understand that I love her, and that is the problem. I do not think the purpose of my life is to care for another or to have someone care for me. I believe painting is the only reason for my existence. And now it has become clear to me that I must choose between love and my work." Munch believed that women drain creative energy from men. This work is called Love and Pain. Munch depicted this scene in 6 different versions. A woman with snow-red hair embraces a man and kisses him on the neck. Yet it seems that with this kiss, the man loses all his energy. It is as if the woman, like an octopus, traps the man in her grasp. It is as if she is drawing the life force out of him. The atmosphere is dark, and the only warm color in the painting is the woman's blood-red hair. This work became known among Munch's friends as the vampire. Although Munch always explained that this was an ordinary kiss between a lover and his beloved, the relationship between Tulla Larsen and Edvard Munch lasted 4 years. From the outside, their relationship did not seem bad at all. They traveled together, talked, and drank to excess. Yet Munch was constantly seeking a way out of the relationship. He tried to distance himself. He was busy with his work and was constantly traveling. In addition, in his spare time, he sought treatment for his numerous illnesses in mental asylums. Gradually, Munch's trips to Europe became frequent and prolonged. Tulla was losing patience. On August 23, 1902, Munch received a letter from a friend stating that Tulla intended to commit suicide. Munch promised that this time, when he returned from his trip, they would have the serious conversation that Tulla had insisted on. Returning to the beginning of the episode, when Munch came home in early September and met with Tulla, it is said that almost nothing about that night's events is certain or clear. A strained relationship and 2 fully intoxicated people in a tense atmosphere. A gun was fired and hit Munch's left-hand fingers. We do not know whether Munch fired or Tulla did. We do not know who intended to stop the other. But we do know that the last thing Tulla did in Munch's life was call a doctor for him. And they never saw each other again. A year later, Tulla married Munch's friend, who was 10 years younger than her. He was also a painter, and this is the image he created of Tulla. However, Munch could never come to terms with the events of that night. This incident confirmed Tulla's fear of everything in the world, especially women. Tulla's marriage to Munch's friend was considered, in Munch's view, a betrayal, and a strong reason for his distrust. He was hospitalized in mental asylums for a period of time. He painted a self-portrait with Tulla Larsen and then split the canvas in two, depicting Tulla as bitter and sullen with red hair. For years, Munch continued to portray Tulla as a killer. His most significant work in this context can be seen in the painting he created inspired by the death of Jean-Paul Marat. Jean-Paul Marat was one of the leaders of the French Revolution, who was murdered by a woman named Charlotte Corday. However, in Munch's painting, he depicts himself in the place of Jean-Paul Marat with a nude Tulla standing over him. The entire painting is tense. The brushwork conveys a sense of anxiety and agitation. Although the injury to Munch's finger was not severe and only shortened his finger, the psychological impact on him was irreparable at that time. Professionally, however, the artist was at the peak of his career, exhibiting in Paris, Vienna, and Prague. He received a Medal of Merit from the Norwegian government, which was a very prestigious and important honor. Nevertheless, that same year, he experienced a psychological breakdown and spent 8 months in treatment at a private psychiatric clinic. The world was never a safe environment for Munch, and all this anxiety and insecurity can be seen in The Scream. Like many of Munch's works, The Scream is a series. The first version was executed in 1893. Munch recounts that at sunset, he had gone for a walk with friends. He says he was crossing a bridge that overlooked part of the city with a river below. He was tired and unwell. He stopped and looked across the river. Suddenly, the sunlight turned the clouds red, and he heard that infinite scream that came from the depths of nature. He felt as if he was pregnant with that scream, and that is how the scream was created. Munch lived near an asylum where his younger sister was admitted, and he constantly heard the screams of the patients from this asylum. Perhaps that was the scream that remained in Munch's mind and scarred him forever. But this work did not remain purely personal. It became a symbol of the fear and loneliness of contemporary humans. The modern person no longer finds safety in their surroundings. The main character is depicted as genderless, neither male nor female, with an open mouth, screaming continuously. It is as if the scream has continued so long that the figure has become a skeleton. He can no longer hear the sounds around him. He holds his hands over his ears and screams with all his might. Everything in the painting, from the sky to the water, even the path, is in vibration and motion. These lines signify instability, confusion, and horror. The two other characters in the painting seem to exist in a world entirely separate from the main figure. They move away, indifferent to the central figure's emotional state, which makes him even lonelier. What is new in this work is that previously artists represented their emotions through depicting what they actually saw, but in their own style. For example, in Van Gogh's Starry Night, one can see the artist's emotional turmoil in the wavy lines. But Munch went further. He depicted a character that does not exist in reality, or at least not in this form. In his own words, he did not want merely to show what he saw. He wanted to represent the emotion he felt through his painting. By exaggerating colors, space, and human depiction, this is what made Munch a pioneer of Expressionism. In total, Munch created 4 colored versions of The Scream. In addition, one lithograph version of this work remains. Munch withdrew from society. Like the figure depicted in Melancholia, he was unable to connect with his surroundings and gradually, voluntarily sought refuge on the margins. He bought a new house and studio in Oslo and kept everything that seemed frightening, everything that could threaten his health, away from himself. Alcohol, tobacco, and women, which, in his own words, were poisonous. Munch wrote, "I live in solitude and fear people. This is the true essence of my existence. I can no longer seek refuge in wine, for even wine was not a reliable sanctuary. The scream sky appeared again and again in Munch's other works, as if the sky was always this color for him, bloody and full of anxiety. Eventually, Edvard Munch passed away on January 23, 1944, in his home in Oslo from bronchitis at the age of 80, having never married. All of his works were donated to the municipality of Oslo, which later became the basis for the establishment of the Munch Museum. Munch, the creator of one of the most famous paintings in the history of art, spent his entire 80-year life in illness and anxiety. Yet he wrote, "I do not want to reject my illness, for I owe my art to it, and it was my art that gave meaning to my life." Thank you for staying with me until this point. As always, I am happy to read your comments, critiques, and suggestions. Also, if you enjoyed this content, the greatest support you can give to Arte AR is to share it with your friends.